Hello and welcome, my name is Piera and today I'm here with my January wrap-up. So January was a wild month. I can't believe we're already 1 month through 2018, as if that isn't exciting enough. It's also slightly terrifying, but it was a good month. So far, so good. Read more books than I have read in a very long time, so I am a very happy girl. A bunch of amazing things have happened, so I'm gonna fill you in on those as well, but I don't even, now I'm just stalling, let's just get into it. So before I get to the books that I finished this month, I also have some cool things that have just recently happened. I spent the last weekend of January down in Melbourne for YA Day, which was run by the girls at the YA Room. I was on the BookTube panel with CHAMI from Is That CHAMI and Lily from Lily C Reads. I will leave their links down below, as well as a link to the YA Room. I'm currently in the process of editing the vlog for that, but it was an absolutely incredible day. The girls did so well to pull it all together. There were authors, there were booktubers, there were book bloggers, there were teens, there were like people from the industry, and a lot of people showed up. We had people selling books, we had people signing books, we had food. It was really, really incredible. I will leave some random footage and photos here. Such an incredible day, and then I spent the next 2 days down in Melbourne making it a little bit of a holiday with Kaz from Little Book Owl. We had a world of fun catching up with some bookish friends, filming some collabs for her channel, my channel, and CHAMI's channel, which you can also stay tuned for because we have quite a few of them. We also had lunch with Jay Kristoff. If you do not know, Jay is the author of Nevernight and Illuminate, and his new book, Lifelike, is about to come out, so definitely check those out if you are a fan. I'm sure you've heard me talk about Nevernight a bunch of times. So it was just a really enjoyable way to end the first month of the year. I'm still riding the high of being with all my friends and making new friends and coming up with cool things. Something else that I will definitely get more into once we know more. Basically, the girls at the YA Room have inspired Kaz and I to start our own book clubs. Kaz is obviously in Sydney, mine is obviously up here in Brisbane. This is like the first unofficial announcement, but we will start announcing things as we go. We're hoping to have it up and running, so the first book of the month will be for March, so hopefully we're ready for next month and we can have our first meetup at the end of March, but we will see. It's primarily going to be fantasy slash sci-fi slash spec fiction. Currently it's just open to everyone, adults and teens, but as we kind of progress and hopefully pick up traction, we're going to split it off into two little, one adult, which I will run, and a YA version, which we will obviously get somebody else to run. Just because I really enjoyed spending time with the bookish community down in Melbourne. We had people fly in from Sydney, I obviously flew in from Queensland, and just to have everyone together was a really, really amazing experience. So I would love to try and bring that to Brisbane. If it is already out here, I'm not aware, so I figured why not just do it myself. But as I said, more info on that will come if you're following my social media, Twitter, Instagram, and obviously YouTube, you will hear about it. Another really great thing this month, my sister Everly finished her original treatment plan for her cancer. This time last year, Everly was diagnosed with stage 4 neuroblastoma, which is a very high-risk childhood cancer. With not great odds, but we've gone through rounds of chemo, immunotherapy, surgery, radiation, a lot of shit that a 2-year-old shouldn't have to deal with, and she's just pulled through. I can't even explain to you how amazing she is. So she recently finished her last immunotherapy in January. We took out her nasal feeding tube the other week, and so now she just looks like a normal kid with really short hair and one more tube hanging out of her belly, which hopefully we will get rid of in the coming months. As it stands, she's really fucking good. Like, she's healthy, she's happy, she seems like a normal 3-year-old. She turned 3 in January. I'm sorry. In the next few weeks we will do her big scans just to triple check that there is no signs of cancer left in her body, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, there obviously isn't, and we can move on to maintenance, which is I think for the next year or two, just going in for those checks and those blood tests just to make sure it's not coming back. And then we are on the road to recovery. So it's just a really fucking good start to the year. The birds are getting along really well. I'm not gonna put them in this video because they have both been very naughty today, so they're on timeout. Another thing that happened this month that kind of blew my mind. It makes me feel really good, but it also like makes me feel like kind of a creeper. Those of you who don't know, what's wrong with you for starters? My favorite book series is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. Pierce Brown is currently touring the US and the UK, and obviously a bunch of people who watch my channel who have read Red Rising and enjoyed Red Rising have gone to his signings. And Becca was kind enough to get me this little video message from Pierce, which, you know, is just, it's just, for some reason it just made my heart soar, made me feel all good and warm and fuzzy inside. I'm not a creep, but this is the message.
Piera, so I hear you're still living in this wrong country. I mean, you really need to fix this and come up from the down under so we can hang out. But anyway, your people are here with me, and we're having a good time, and reading this sucker soon. But anyway, love ya, see you soon.
So then I just had a really good laugh at the shopping center car park that I was at when that one came through. It was just really fucking random. Anyway, books. The books that I read this month. As I said, I read a fuck ton of books this month. 2 of them I technically finished on the 31st of December and the 1st of January, so I'm gonna add them to this wrap up. You may have seen them in my vlogs for last year, but I figured I love them so much I wanted to actually talk about them. So ultimately I read 13 books this month and DNF'd 3. That is the most books I have read in such a long time, and I loved 99% of them. It was a good, strong way to start the year, and I am really hoping that it stays like on the up. No particular order because I cannot for the life of me remember. I will show you what books I read this month. Start with 2 books that I DNF'd because I just don't really care about them that much. But the first book that I DNF'd was Uprooted by Naomi Novik. I know a few people really love this book, but I just could not get into it. Basically, there's a woman who lives in this wood, and the wood is kind of haunted / enchanted, and there is this wizard basically who lives near the town that she lives in and who kind of keeps the people safe from this creepy wood. But every year or 10 years, the wizard comes down and like takes a girl from the village to like serve him basically. And so this kind of follows our protagonist as that happens to her. I got about 150 pages through it. I was already struggling, but I was hoping that it would pick up. It's just not my sort of writing style. I didn't really care much for the characters or the world. I mean, it's a good book, it just wasn't for me. The next book I DNF'd was Everless by Sarah Holland, and I had a feeling I would DNF this before I even picked it up. But I picked it up to give it a go. It was a new YA fantasy release, and you know how I feel about YA fantasy at the moment. And I honestly didn't even get far enough into it to be able to tell you what happened. Basically, people sell their blood for time to live longer, or for money. I'm not quite sure. I got maybe like 100 pages in, and I didn't care about the characters, I didn't care about the world, and I didn't care about plot. I just did not care about it in any way, shape, or form. So DNF'd that one. The third book I DNF'd is probably gonna get people a bit angry at me because I know it's a favorite of a lot of people, but that's Scythe by Neil Shusterman, and I just didn't enjoy it. I read 90% of this book. I had maybe 50 pages left, and I was like, I can't keep doing it, I don't like it. I wanted to push through it because I know so many people are raving about it. I wanted to give it like a fair chunk of my attention, even though at the moment I've just been like, if I don't like a book within the first 100 pages, I'm not gonna keep reading. But I kept reading in hopes that it got better. To me, it didn't. I didn't hate it. I mean, I obviously didn't like it or love it, but it didn't do anything for me. I found the characters to be really simple and 2D, and the plot was weird, and the writing was weird, and the characters were weird, and the world was weird, and I just, like, none of it really sit with me. So that's why I DNF'd it right at the end. But now to the books that I actually read this month and absolutely adored. So first of all, I read the entire Broken Empire trilogy by Mark Lawrence, which is Prince of Thorns, King of Thorns, and Emperor of Thorns. I've been looking for a good fantasy series for a while, and I've had this one on my shelf, and I never picked it up, and I picked it up and I got past the first 10 pages and I was like, I'm in, I'm hooked, I love it. So these books basically follow our main character. I'm gonna say George because that's how I read it. It's spelled J-O-R-G, and I know a lot of people pronounce it Jorg, Jorg, but for my sake I went with George. But the Broken Empire trilogy follows the life of George as a 10-year-old boy, as his mother and younger brother are brutally murdered in front of him while he is trapped in a thorn bush, and his life as he goes back to his palace, back to his father, and kind of deals with what the thorn bush left him, and then just follows his journey to revenge, basically. It's another one of my favorite revenge stories. So like I said, I really loved these books. I loved George as a protagonist. Obviously he started at 10 years of age, and by the final book I'm pretty sure he's like in his 20s or his 30s. So originally that was like my first bit of, I don't know, like having this 14-year-old boy doing all these like big, hardcore, scary, aggressive, killing things and being like, okay. And then as he got older, and he seemed to age really slowly, like he went 14, 15, 16, 18, 20. Like those younger years, like I'm always really not reluctant about young fantasy protagonists like that, but I just remember, I mean, I was never a 14-year-old boy, but I remember at 14 I was pretty fucking useless. It was a little bit of a stretch for me to just accept that, but then I accepted it and I was like, I love you. George is this brutal, like hardcore, just, I mean, like, brutal is the best way. Black-hearted character that I absolutely loved. I loved all of the cast of characters, and there's a lot of characters, so that was another thing that I had to wrap my brain around. There's a bajillion and one characters, there's a bajillion and one places that they travel. I was using the map a lot, and I enjoyed the world building and the story and the plot and kind of like everything about it I really, really enjoyed. Book 1 I loved, book 2 I loved even more, book 3 was obviously tying all the ends together, so a little bit of it I was kind of like speed reading just to get to the parts that made sense to me, but overall I really, really enjoyed this trilogy, and I would definitely recommend it to any fantasy lovers. And because I loved it so much, I went and bought the prequels, kind of prequels, but this is a bind-up of a bunch of short stories centering around the Road Brothers, who are the brothers that we first meet George with, his like little band of merry men that are definitely all absolutely bloody brutal killers. There's also some stories of George in there as well, and some other characters that you meet. Again, I absolutely loved it. It was really great to dive into some of my favorite characters who we don't necessarily get a lot of in the trilogy, but we get enough in this. So it was super exciting to finish that as well. The next book I read was Circe by Madeline Miller. Madeline Miller is obviously the author of The Song of Achilles. This one was on my most anticipated releases of the year, and it did not disappoint. Madeline Miller has this like magical way of writing, and especially like I'm a huge Greek mythology buff. I really, really loved it. So seeing this, and like this is a myth that I'm not overly familiar with, but I'm still aware of. So it was really nice to see how she took that, what she did with that. Really, really enjoyed it. It does do like really excessive time jumps, obviously being an immortal, there's like hundreds of years between events. It's really good writing. The next one is a book that I finished at the end of December, but I'm going to include it in this because I liked it so much, and that is City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. I absolutely adored this book. I didn't know much about it going in. This is obviously an ARC copy, this isn't the final cover, but we follow this young woman as she's thrust into this world that she had heard of but didn't realize was real, and that involved her in any way, shape or form. There's quite a lot of mythology and history in this sort of book. I'm not completely familiar with what it's inspired by, but I have an idea, but I really loved it. I mean, there were bits that I didn't like, there were bits that I was, at the protagonist, I was just like, what is wrong with you, what are you doing? Apart from that, the world building and the writing was really, really great, and I really, really enjoyed it. The next one I also finished on the 1st of January, so I'm counting it. It became one of my favorite books of 2017. Just at the last moment it snuck in there. That's Furyborn by Claire Legrand. This is obviously an ARC cover. Absolutely fucking loved it. It's the first in the Imperium trilogy, and I do have a book talk that I have coming up in the next few weeks for this one if you're interested. But Furyborn basically follows two different timelines set a couple thousand years apart. First of all, we follow Raelle, who's a young girl who basically discovers, comes across, announces that she has all of these powers that are ultimately linked to this legendary queen, the Sun Queen. So once she's kind of exposed herself, she then has to go through all these trials to prove that she is the Sun Queen, and therefore to become like the most powerful being. Unless of course the trials kill her, because they're not easy trials. And then a couple thousand years later we have Eliana, who has basically taken up life as a thief, as a pickpocket, as an assassin, just to kind of keep her family afloat. Obviously in the 1,000 years between Queen Raelle, like some shit's gone down, there's wars, all that sort of stuff. And all of a sudden all these women in her town start disappearing, and then one day her mother disappears, so she has to then go and find her mother, and also finds out how she and Queen Raelle are intertwined. But I really fucking love this book, was the point of it. I was a little iffy to begin with because YA fantasy right now is not my jam, but this one really pulled it through. I loved both of the main characters. I think out of both of them, Raelle is probably my favorite. I loved her story the most. Anyway, I really, really enjoyed it. I'm super pumped for book 2, which I'm pretty sure is like a year away. But it became one of my favorite books, one of my favorite fantasy books. I love it. First book that I actually read this year was Rain to the Earth by A.C. Gargan, which is a YA fantasy again. I didn't hate it, I didn't love it, it didn't change my life. I finished it, which I guess says enough. I enjoyed the characters, I enjoyed the world. The magic system was a little, I don't want to say confusing to me, but I definitely skimmed like the main part of the explanation, so I couldn't really catch up in the end. And then because I get a good stuff discount at my bookshop, I also started a bit of poetry just to pass the time. I read Sea of Strangers by Lang Leave, I read Bone by Ursa Daly Ward, and I read Love Her Wildly by Atticus. So these are obviously just a bunch of different poetry. There were poems in all 3 books that I really loved. There were ones there that I didn't really connect with as much, but it was just like a nice, quick, easy, pass the time sort of read as well. I also read The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. When Jude is younger, her parents are murdered in front of her, and her twin sister, and her elder sister are spirited away to the land of Fairy, where we find out a couple years later that the man who stole them is the man who murdered their parents. and kind of what it's like for Jude and her sisters to navigate a fairy court being human, which is ultimately not a good thing. It was on my most anticipated books of 2018 list. I was iffy because I didn't know much about it, but I knew. So the last book that was fairy related that I was looking forward to was an Enchantment of Ravens, and that really let me down. So this is kind of what I wanted an Enchantment of Ravens to be. It had really good world building with the world of fairy as I know it. The main character definitely grew on me. The romance that's in the book isn't what you expect it to be, and that's what I really enjoyed. There are a few things in the book that I was kind of like, oh, this hurts. The main character is involved in both receiving and giving a bit of bullying in this book, which was like to the point where I was like, yeah, but it just adds to how brutal I guess that the world is. So I mean, going into that knowing that, get what you get from it. And also obviously because I reread Iron Gold by Pierce Brown, which is obviously the 4th book in the Red Rising saga. I have a spoiler review and a non-spoiler review on my channel which you can go and check out. This is the Waterstones edition with the black spray painted edges and obviously signed. I'm also listening to it on audiobook as well. The audiobook I'm not loving as much as Red Rising for a few reasons. I mean, obviously first of all we have 4 different narrators now as opposed to just one. I like some of them, I don't like some of them, I like bits that some of them do, I don't like bits that some of them do, and it's such a long book. It's a lot longer and a lot thicker than the Red Rising trilogy, and a lot slower in the way that if Red Rising was fast-paced action, Iron Gold is a lot more political and slow-paced, so that is the other reason that I'm like, I mean, I love it. Anyway, so that was the books that I read in the month of January, and kind of December, but mostly January. As I said, it was a really good reading month. Like, it kicked off really well. It's continued strong. Hopefully in February, I've got a bunch of new books that I'm so excited to read that will also carry on strong. So I am pumped and ready to do some serious reading in 2018. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I will see you next time. Okay, bye!